What's up, everybody? Welcome to the third episode of the Div Dive. Today we're chatting with Tony Seets, the Flow Maestro himself. Tony is a full-time freelance Webflow developer and overall awesome human, and we had a great conversation today. We chatted about navigating a career switch from, he was in like retail and sales, and just navigating that switch into full-time freelance Webflow development. So if that's something you're interested in doing in the short term, I would highly suggest listening to this episode. Alongside that, we chatted about navigating being a new parent, how awesome the Webflow community is, and so much more. It was an overall great conversation, and I really hope you enjoy it. If you could all do me a huge favor and just hit subscribe wherever you're listening to right now. If that's on YouTube, give us a subscribe and a like. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give us a little subscribe as well. It's greatly appreciated. And without further ado, let's dive into it.
Welcome. Let's dive in.
Hello, Tony. Welcome to the Div Dive podcast. Thank you for joining me today, buddy.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat today. I've always appreciated your energy, your contributions to the Webflow community. I feel like you help others and support everybody without asking much in return fairly often, and I appreciate that about you. And you're always just a very positive and smart person. And you're just extremely good at what you do as well, so I'm really excited to chat today. And yeah, I've appreciated getting to know you over the years and hoping to learn a little bit more about you today. I figured we could dig into your freelance journey or your journey to becoming a freelancer and chat about that a bit, and then maybe dig into some other stuff. We can jam on freelancing, working, becoming a new parent. I know you just became a new parent. Congrats, by the way. That's
Thank
fantastic. You. But yeah, does that sound good to you?
Absolutely. All of the above sounds great.
Nice. Okay, well, let's dive into it. So when I first met you, from what I remember, you pulled over on the side of the road to hop on a Zoom call with me and my co-founder, Brett. I think we were chatting about just trying to get you to work with us in some capacity or something like that. But
Yep.
From what I gather at that time, you were still at, I believe it's a retail job. Where you were kind of higher up at a particular company, and you were just on the verge of diving into the freelance life. Could you tell me a little bit about that job and how you came across Webflow and how you started building websites?
Yeah. There's a
That's
whole
a big
big
question.
backstory there. I know. And I really want to talk about that specific day and taking that call with you guys too, because that was just such a historic week even for me in my freelance journey. But I'll get there, I think, at the end of this. So I don't know. I graduated high school, didn't go to college, didn't have any design background, dinked around with computers, jailbroke my iPhones, was an Android loyalist for a long time, and tinkered with tech kind of all my life, was a video game nerd. So I kind of had an affinity for tech and building websites, and built some websites as a kid. I've shared this a couple times, I think, on some FinSuite streams and things like that. But one of the websites that my father and I built when I was maybe 12, we built it in Dreamweaver. Actually, is still live to this day.
Nice.
And it has PNGs as the hover states on buttons, so they go from black to blue in the hover state, but they're two images laid over each other.
Crazy.
But I kind of got out of that game, and then I had a few rough years with friendships and jobs and other troubled history, and I found myself more or less working at a grocery store. A decent job. I could get hours and I could do the work, and I was apparently plenty capable and did good work. So I started in retail grocery, working for a company called Safeway Albertsons, now Albertsons. And I started pushing carts, bagging groceries, and scrubbing toilets. And my whole joke as I got promoted through that kind of corporate ladder was that I was really good at scrubbing toilets. I guess I was just better than the next guy in some form or fashion, and I could make sure that people kind of recognize that. And I did that more or less in the different positions that I took on. I was promoted, I think it's like 7 times or something. So,
Nice.
you know, I worked in the meat department for a little bit. I was the meat department second. I was a supervisor. I was a front end manager. And then I did some traveling training work for the company. So I flew to several different states, led a small team there, and that kind of gave me a big perspective for operations and admin. And then when I came back, I took an interview for an assistant store director role. And according to them, I knocked it out of the park. And then I did the assistant store director thing for about 3 years. Bounced between a couple different stores, had a little bit of fun. And then I ultimately, like, I get bored easily. Like I need something new to do, some new buttons to push, or some new challenge, or some new environment, or new people. And it's not that I couldn't continue doing these different things, but that's kind of why I got promoted. I think almost every 2 years I was in a new role or in a new department. And about that 3-year mark is kind of when I hit that burnout point, and I was thinking, well, I could either become a store director and largely do the same thing that I'm doing now, you know, make a decent salary, have good vacation, have good compensation, or I could try and figure out something else to do. And I like muddled around through all these different things. It's like, I don't know. I got into a handful of things. Like I want to do like a smart home operations business, you know, go in and like consult with new homeowners or new construction and install all these different pieces of tech and kind of integrate everything. And more or less like that was a wash, and like the tech wasn't really there and things didn't really play nice together easily. So it was more going to be a headache. And then I've kind of done like PC repair work over the years and kind of been that the troubleshooting guy in the family. Like why doesn't the printer work and this and that. So I kind of entertained like doing like a mom and pop shop like PC repair business. And then you'll hear me talk about this a little bit, like when I talk about like future goals. But I always, if I'm looking at something, some destination that I want to go in, you can kind of like cast yourself into the future a little bit, right? Like, say I was an assistant store director and I wanted to be a store director. Like, I can sit down, I can close my eyes, and I can picture that and kind of figure out what my day-to-day looks like. And the day-to-day as far as like who I interact with, how I feel when I go to bed at night, you know, how my family relationships are, like what my free time looks like, what my headspace looks like. And you can kind of press the future or your future plans like through that filter and see if like, it's almost like trying it on, right? And the computer business was like that. And the home automation business was very much like that. I'm like, yeah, I could do that, but I'm just going to be sitting there frustrated, staring at a computer going, I can't solve this problem. And then suddenly I solve it. And then the next day I'm going to come back in and I'm going to do the same thing. So kind of in that process a little bit, like I remembered that I had experience from video games and like community forums, working with design and websites and launching forums on like vBulletin and things like that, like hosting my own servers on FTPs and, you know, just dinking around as a teenage kid. And remembered that I had a little bit of a knack for understanding HTML and CSS and like wanting to build for the web. So much like many of us in this Webflow space, I started on this path of like building a business plan to build some form of like one-person agency with plans to scale, and I wanted to turn it into this whole WordPress deal. And I stumbled into a YouTube video for Webflow, and then like kind of the rest was history. It was like I watched all the university tutorials in a weekend, and then I've logged thousands of hours in the Designer since then. So
yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar. I mean, so many notes in there that you mentioned that I feel similarly about. One thing about, you know, you mentioned kind of having that future goal and that filter that you put whatever potential position that you might want to get into. I had a very similar scenario where I just wanted to have some freedom and work on creative stuff. And those were my two filters. I didn't even know if it was websites or whatever. So I just went and tried a bunch of different things and explored. And that's how I ended up here doing, building websites and stuff like that. And I think that's a great analogy for those who are kind of lost. Just think about what you want to potentially do. Try to just have some notes about it and like think through it, and then just explore and try different things. And yeah, similarly with Webflow, I found it just, I think it was like a Rand Segal Flux Academy ad or something like that. And then I just dove in, bought that course, and yeah, it's been crazy ever since. So you were working at this job. I want to go back to that week that you mentioned, that WeChat, because that's, you said it was like an important week for you in general. I would just love to hear about that, and then maybe how you ended up just taking that dive into full-time freelance, I guess.
Yeah. So there's another piece to the tail end of that story in my retail career. So I transitioned kind of to the other side. I was on the inside the retail store for 10 years, and then got really burnt out on that. Again, I needed some new buttons to push, a new switchboard, some new people, some new variables, a new environment. Yeah. And my brother-in-law worked for a direct store distribution company called Bigfoot here in the Pacific Northwest, and they essentially sell Pepsi and beer products to all of these retail chains, Walmart, Safeways, mom and pop gas stations and whatnot. And lo and behold, a sales opportunity came up, and he knew that I was like really itching to get out, and I wasn't in a very good headspace, and just needed a place to go and something to do, and maybe it wasn't an end place for me, but I got employed with those guys and did that for 2.5 years, and drove up and down the southern Oregon coast in a little Pepsi Prius.
Nice.
From basically Coos Bay to Brookings, so I would spend, I think it's 14 hours a week inside of a car. And then I would stop inside these grocery stores and sell them Pepsi products and make sure that all my inventory was managed, and kind of manage a small team of drivers and merchandisers. But I found myself bored again. And I didn't necessarily want to go up the ladder with this company because it wasn't conducive to like the type of life that I wanted to live and like the family life that I wanted to have. So yeah, that kind of itch to start all those businesses was kind of happening through that period as well. And I think that was maybe 2017. I found Webflow in 2018. Like I kind of got that itch, found Webflow in 2018. I was still working retail. And while I was still with Safeway Albertsons, I was doing the university stuff and tinkering around and dealing with all these clonables and trying a couple local client projects. And I knew like that's what I wanted to do. And more or less I did that for like another 2.5 or like almost 3 years. I just kind of like, I tried to do the local scene, and I wasn't very good at it because I had to do the marketing and the branding and the copy and all the sales and all the business admin. And, but that's like largely why I took that sales rep gig, is because it had a more predictable schedule. I worked Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, and I had Saturdays and Sundays and Wednesdays like to sit down and learn my skills, connect with people in the community, try and sell myself, or do some work. And so yeah, it was like this big process. And then beginning of last year, like January, I had this weird case of vertigo. And this goes like a little bit in the weeds, but I had this weird case of vertigo, and I had to take a couple days off from work. And I'm not a guy who calls in sick. I don't use my sick leave. I'm, very upfront about vacation leave. And like they forced me to take some time off, and I had nothing to do but sit and twiddle my thumbs at home. My wife was at work, and so I had a few days off to just kind of think about what was going on. And in that kind of like liminal space of not having anything to do and not having to care about work, knowing that somebody else was there taking care of it, I realized that I was kind of burning the candle at both ends, and I was going nowhere with my Webflow stuff. And it was in that kind of window that I was just like, wait, I either need to like make this work or I need to stop, because like, one, it's killing me, but it's also taking a toll on my wife, and it's taking a toll on my future. It's taking a toll on my finances. I mean, I probably dumped 15 to 20 grand or something silly into SaaS tools and tech, just trying to like make myself comfortable and get myself up to speed in the space, thinking I had to have all those things, and marketing my business and taking losses with client projects and things like that. And yeah, it's like in that window, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I either gotta make it or break it. And I remember like sitting down and writing in a notebook like where I saw myself in the next year, in the next like 5 years. And I wrote it out in detail, like what I was doing and what I wasn't doing, what my days looked like inside and out, how I felt when I went to bed. And I really just sat there and I thought about it. And I also thought about like what they'd look like if I kept going on the road that I was going and didn't take any, real action. And essentially, like, I just started acting as if I was that person who was moving toward that future version of myself. And that's when I jumped on Twitter and just started talking to folks in the Webflow space. Like, I didn't need any permission to jump on and like cheer for him, to share my thoughts, to share my work, to try and help people. I just did it. And that's, I found like the FinSuite crew a little bit and got some positive reinforcement from like Rymar and Joe Krug and other influential folks in the community that just like really bolstered my spirits and gave me a lot of confidence. And then somewhere in that process, I realized like, wait, I'm pretty good at this like Webflow thing, just the technical stuff. Maybe I can dump the rest of my business and just go all in on being like really good at this thing. And like, that was kind of a big point of clarity for me. And after that, it's like everything just cascaded to come to fruition from like what I had, forecasted for my future. It was really weird. I just like had to show up, and yeah.
Yeah, dude, that's man, such a great story. And I feel like I when I was freelancing or whatever, I just took a dive in, and I kind of backed myself into a corner where I had to I put myself in a position where I had to force through it. And I feel like that you had a similar situation where you're like, okay, it's now or never. Like, if you're kind of like half on the edge, like 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out, it can be really easy to coast. But I just went out the door. I was like, okay, I have to pay my bills now. I have to figure this out. And it was not very smart because I didn't have any savings, but I forced myself to figure it out. And it sounds like you had a similar scenario.
And I know we were asking about that specific week, and forgive me, sometimes I'm really good at being brief, like client communications.
It's all good.
Punch list and bullets. But with people I like to talk to, I'll just like spill out all the details and try and remember everything I can. So,
no, it's a great story, man. No worries.
I want to get back to that week because it was like this really pivotal week for me. I had put out a portfolio in the beginning of October, and I called it Flow Maestro. And there's kind of a whole story about like what I was trying to do when I first launched it, and then I had some communications with some others in the space, and I spun it up into this other thing. Well, it happened to be received well by the community. It was featured on Made in Webflow and Reloom, and I'm like forever grateful for those things. And it got a lot of attention on Twitter, and I had no idea that it would kind of be received like that. I didn't know that the work was anything for anybody to care about. I was like, cool, I have like this portfolio thing in this service, I'm gonna put it out, and I'm just gonna like hope for the best. I poured a lot of time into it and teetered on launching it, and that whole perfection game. Well, I put it out, it was received well. My wife and I go on our anniversary trip, and like the whole time that we're on our anniversary trip away from home and like having a good time, I have this idea in my head that I'm like, wait, like I now have some recurring revenue from like some maintenance, like ongoing maintenance contract work that I was referred for, that I knew that I could kind of leverage if I wanted more work. And then I kind of had like this feeling of community pushing me a little bit, and knowing that there was leads coming into my website. And I had it in my head that I was like, remembering for myself that it was either make it or break it. And I knew that I had all of the pieces to just like quit my job. And then it was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it work. If I have to go and mow lawns to fill in the gaps or go back to bagging groceries in between gigs, I'll do it, because I can't stand going to this other place anymore. Well, I put in my 2 weeks. Week goes by. And in that week, I think my portfolio had been out for 2 weeks. I was hired to white label a project for as much money in 1 week as what I'd taken home in 1 month at my previous salary job. And I was making about $70,000 a year in my salary job with compensation and 3 weeks vacation and whatnot. So I wasn't not doing well. But when I could make my entire salary in a week, I was just kind of blown away. And I was like, this switch flipped in my head. Like, if I could do that once, I could do it again. And yeah, that week that I talked to you was my last week at my job. I took on this rush job for somebody who needed it done, and needed it done like to a T, without any questions, by the end of the week, without having their hand held. And I think I worked 50 or 60 hours in my full-time job. And then I probably sunk 50 or 60 hours into that project as well, just to get it done. And I was gassed. But I also was so stoked to just be like talking to people in the community and like finally having a little wind in my sails. And like, I remember I had like connected with some people when launching my portfolio. I said, hey, I'd love to chat with anybody just to talk shop and life, freelance. And I happened to talk with you or schedule a call with you. And then I scheduled a call with Waldo. And I scheduled those on my last Friday at work. So I told you that I drove the Pepsi Prius down the Oregon coast. And yeah, those calls happened to be scheduled like at just the right times where like I could take my lunch or stop and take a break. So yeah, I wasn't at home, and I was working a whole bunch and just absolutely exhausted, but super excited about everything that was going on and finally getting some traction. And I pulled over on the side of the highway with my laptop and stuck it on the back of the Prius. And I remember you and Brett had commented about the scenery, because there's basically just a bunch of trees behind me. It's a big, gorgeous background and blue sky. Like, yeah, it's really cool. But I am standing in this, gravel pullout on the side of the highway, essentially, with my laptop propped open, and you guys are on my hotspot. And the conversations that I had that day, still, like, they set me up for some of the success that I experienced still to this day. Because you guys, the same thing as the folks previously, just kind of giving me that little bit of encouragement, just more or less boosted me up a little bit more and gave me a lot of confidence to be like, oh, if they say this and I can do this, then I can do it again. We can just keep this thing going. And here I am. It's been since September last year that I quit my job, so coming up on a year.
Dude, that's fantastic, and congrats, by the way. It's a really tough accomplishment diving in, and to see you doing so well is very exciting for me. One thing about that meeting, I just remember thinking, like, what a legend. Like, it's just a great show of your character, and that's why I think I've always appreciated you ever since, because I don't know if I've met anybody who would do that. Pull over and do a hotspot and then do a meeting. Like, to me, that's crazy. And just the fact that you respected like my time enough to do something like that, that's really crazy to me. And I remember being very impressed by that. And you, I think we didn't end up working together because I didn't think I could afford you, to be honest. But
after you guys told me what I could charge.
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully that helped when pricing your stuff in the future. But yeah, like,
I kid you not, it did. Between the conversations with you and Waldo, I went into my next client sales call. One of my it was my first real sales call, and I set a rate, and they went, okay, and I went, oh my god, like, really? And I still work with that client to this day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think people really underestimate how much you can charge for certain things. A lot of clients get really frustrated working with freelancers sometimes. And if they have the budget to just pay somebody who they know is just going to get it done, they'll pay $500 an hour if they need to. And that's how I even think about some stuff at Flowspur. I was like, if somebody would just do it right, so I don't have to hold their hand or do a bunch of QA, it'll save me time. $500 an hour to me is worth it.
Exactly.
But anyways, I want to chat about the Webflow community specifically because you mentioned that a few times about how welcoming everybody was and how it added some wind to your sails. And yeah, I just want to share appreciation for that the community in general. I feel that so deeply as well. And I had a similar experience when I was starting. I felt like everybody was so nice. Everybody I've talked to was very encouraging. And it's just crazy to me how I feel like every single person you run into in that community is so nice. And the interactions between everybody, I think, breed more niceness and more community and more supporting everybody. And I just love that so much. Just about that the community in general. It's so exciting.
Yeah, it's this. It's just really cool. It's almost like finding your tribe, right? I was kind of like a lost puppy there for a while, and then it was like, wait a second, here's a lot of people trying to do very similar things with their lives in very similar stages of life, from similar but different, or different but similar backgrounds.
Yeah.
And Webflow Conf kind of confirmed that. It was just hanging out with a bunch of my best friends, which was really a trip to me. I mean, rolling around the streets of San Francisco with you and Brett and the Reloom gang was even crazy. If there wasn't Webflow, we could still hang out and associate with all this. It was just such a neat experience.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm super down to chat about that experience because that was a first conference for me as well, and just in general, I didn't even go to any conferences before that, and that just that being the first conference I go to, it was so exciting and so welcoming, and everybody was so awesome. But I'm up in Canada. I think you're in the Midwest, right?
Pacific Northwest.
Okay,
Oregon coast, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm very disconnected from tech epicenters or very popular hotspots for that type of work and stuff. So I don't get the opportunity to chat with people about Webflow. I think I could probably count on two hands the people I know in my city that work in Webflow, and we're the major city in Alberta. You know what I mean? It was such a weird experience for me and so exciting to be able to go there and just chat with everybody and just feel like you're automatically friends with everybody in a moment's notice. I think when I first saw you, I was like, "Oh, Tony," and then we were just already in a conversation. Whereas most of the time, you would go to these things and you would just be like, "Hi, my name is Keith. I run Flow Sparrow."
Yeah,
and you'd be like, you know what I mean, that little intro or whatever, and it's just awkward. But it was so easy. I think when I first walked into the conference, I saw Colleen, and she just had a pin for me with my profile picture on it, and I was like, what? How? I've never met this person. She's so nice, and she made a little pin for me, and I was like, this is crazy. I'm just floored. I was overwhelmed, actually, to be honest, walking in there. But I was wondering if you had a similar experience that year.
I most definitely did. Like I said, I kind of jumped into Twitter, and I just shared with no intention of growing a followership, no plan, no strategy, no specific message. I was going to share whatever I felt like whenever I was inspired to do so, whether it was work or life or just a picture.
Yeah.
Or just anything really. So I just kind of got into it, and I connected with a lot of people on Twitter, and then also I was in the FinSuite streams and some of the Reloom streams, and just built these sort of remote relationships with these people kind of all over the place, and was in some DMs with many people, and showing up to Webflow Conf was very much like this kind of reunion for a lot of the relationships that I'd already made. It was like, oh, I see this person and I feel 1000% comfortable just walking up and giving them a hug, right? Or like, dude, it's so great to finally connect and like meet you in real life. It was just, I was sitting on the news of just finding out in October, right? Conf was in November. I was sitting on the news that my wife was pregnant, so we were expecting. And we weren't in that window where it was like okay to share with anybody, but I also kind of had that energy, and I was just so happy because that's something I've wanted for so long. And like that in connection with like actually meeting these people in real life and just realizing that all the things that I told myself in January, February, in the beginning of the year had kind of finally come to fruition because I didn't know I was going to make it to Conf. Like actually were happening and I was there experiencing it. I smiled nonstop that entire trip. I didn't have a single bad moment. I grinned from ear to ear. Then my face hurt. And that's how it was that entire time. Talking to everybody.
Yeah, dude, I was exhausted by day 2. Like I remember, to be fair, like I think that first night there was that little event or whatever, and I definitely had too many drinks because I was so excited. But it was like the day 2, I was just like I couldn't even talk. I feel like my voice was gone and my energy was so low because I just was so excited the entire first day. And yeah, it was just such a great experience. I'm sad that it sounds like we're probably not going to the same Webflow Conf this year. I'm going to San Francisco. From what I got, you're going to Chicago. I'm so tempted to just kind of go from San Francisco to Chicago to New York and just hang out with the people after. But I don't know if I could do it.
I think you could probably bypass the wait list. I mean, you do have a tattoo.
See,
you'd be like, this is my hall pass, right? Like, just let me in.
Maybe.
I've paid my dues.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't. I also don't really want to take away a seat from somebody who could experience what we experienced last year.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And so I was thinking maybe I could just come to like I think. I don't know if I can share this, but I think they're like announcing a second day with workshops and stuff like that.
They already did.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was thinking about trying to do something like that. But anyways, I'm glad you're going to Chicago. I'm going to try the San Francisco thing out again. And it should be fun. I'm sad I'm going to miss you, but I think it's just going to be a fun experience regardless.
Same, man. Yeah. Yeah, San Francisco would be great. I think that opening event is just going to be, again, a really cool experience with a lot of product announcements and from the looks of it, a large, piece of like the Webflow Twitter community and like the folks that we've all connected with over the last couple years in this space. I think we'll still be going to San Francisco, and I'm, I think it was like $250 or something, $150 round trip for me to fly from. Oregon down there last year, and my stay happened to be free, so it all worked out really well for me. This year I chose Chicago because my buddy Corey Runnels that we connected with, the Flow Man, right?
The Flow Man.
And I believe Chris Abrat's going down there, and several other people that we connected with last year in San Francisco. Corey lives like 40 minutes north of Chicago. And I've never been any further east than Montana. So it's an opportunity for me to travel a little bit and also go and hang out with my pal. As well as like, do some networking and just talk shop and talk Webflow and meet some new people and have a little fun, maybe learn some things.
Totally. I'm very excited for Webflow Conf. I think it's going to be a good one. But I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and just chat about... you talked about jumping into full-time freelance. I'd love to chat about right now because you just recently became a parent. Congrats again, by the way. That's such an amazing news.
Thank you.
I'm curious what that experience was like for you, because I know you mentioned you've been wanting that for a while, and how your work life is now in relation to that. I'm curious. I'm sure the dynamic shifted slightly.
Yeah, they definitely have. So. I don't know. I think I made it till about my mid-20s thinking that I never wanted to have kids. And I've shared this before, but I was married married for 3 years. We were together for 5 before that, and then was divorced. Kind of took a little bit of time to like recover from that, and then like figure out who I was and what I wanted to do and like, what I thought life should look like. And in my first marriage, one of the things that I wanted was children. I figured that out somewhere in the mix of us being together, but like we just couldn't get our ducks in a row enough for me to ever feel comfortable like bringing another human into the world and taking care of one, and like actually having the headspace to do so. To be able to like, oh, my kid's sick at school, I could just like leave and go pick them up or take care of them, or yeah, I can make it to every soccer game. And I always like, I thought if I was going to be a parent that I'd want preferably as much flexibility around spending time with them as I possibly could. So yeah, I met my current wife, and we were together for a while, almost 3 years. Bought a house together, and like everything just started kind of
working out.
All the dominoes started falling in the right order, and then we bought a house together, and then we got married, and then like the whole freelance thing kind of happened, and like that was also a big indicator of like, okay, now I have kind of these check boxes that have been floating in my mind for so many years that like I can do this now. And we were in a good place financially, and I was in a good headspace, and so yeah, I'm trying to have kids, and now we have one. So she's a month old, and she's just kind of amazing.
Of course, yeah.
It's wild. Like nothing prepares you for like the birthing experience. I can share that much. Like you think that you can picture yourself there doing all the things, and then you're there, and then you're like, nothing readies you for this. And yeah, then the dynamics at home, they're particularly interesting, I think, for my wife and I, because my wife is a school teacher. And when we got together, that was one thing that I recognized about her, was that one, she was super sweet, and two, she's really good with children, and she really wants to have her own kids. It was like early childhood development and those kind of things in school. Is a second grade teacher, so teaching 7-year-olds on a daily basis, and she just had such compassion and like would show up to their basketball games and soccer games just of her own free will to surprise them. So I knew that was kind of going to be a thing, but she's also off for the summer. So our daughter was born June 28th, and my wife was out of school for the summer, the 16th of June. So
perfect.
Where I think a lot of people struggle a lot with, the newborn stage is like getting enough rest and having flexibility, but she doesn't work during the summer, gets paid during the summer, and I work from home, and I have a pretty flexible schedule, right? If I want to start at 6 or 5 in the morning, or 10 a.m., I can, so long as I'm communicating with my clients and getting their work done. So that's been really kind of amazing, like on the sleep schedule. And I tell people, not trying to like gloat or brag or anything, but I feel like it's like newborning on cheat mode, right? Where like most people would have been probably similar to my shoes before I quit my job. I was getting up at 3 in the morning, sometimes 2:30 in the morning to work out before I jumped in the car and was driving down the highway at 4 in the morning to go to my next store and sell stuff. And then my wife was going to work. Like, I can't imagine trying to get enough rest and juggle all of life's responsibilities and meeting family and friends and social engagements and trying to stay on top of client work and like just taking care of my own body and, making sure that I'm connected with my family and my friends and, and like trying to do those things if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now. So I feel like we're really, really fortunate to be in the shoes that we are. And it's not been without struggle for sure. My wife being home all day while I'm trying to work is like, cool. She's like right out there. it's gorgeous outside. I want to go play. I don't necessarily want to work all day, right? Like, I have those days. And my daughter's out there, and I want to spend as much quality time with her in this time that I won't give back. So it's been, like, on one hand, I feel like really fortunate, and on the other, it's like, this is also hard, and it's just it's different things than I would have expected from this kind of transitionary period. But it's been, I mean, really cool, and I'm super grateful for like all that life has unfolded for my wife and I and our daughter.
Dude, yeah, that's amazing. Very happy for you. It sounds like you got a great little family going on right now, and I'm jealous. I don't think I've ever really invested in dating or trying to think about a family. I've always been very work focused, and I think that gives me a little inspiration to maybe explore that, because I think it's probably there's some fulfilling aspects to it that I might be completely missing out on. You know, entire work. Your entire life can't be work, so it's something I'm kind of trying to think through at the moment. And yeah, but I like the note that you mentioned about the flexibility. I don't really understand how parents do it at all in general, just flat out, first off, but trying to juggle that with jobs where you have to be at a certain place at a certain time, like I couldn't comprehend that, and I feel terrible for those who struggle with that for sure. But how I thought about, you know, just getting into this workplace is very similar. It's just like, I want to be able to do whatever I want during my day. Like, I don't like being at a place at a certain time, regardless. You know, when it comes to Flowspur, I'm up at 6 a.m. usually working no matter what anyways. But I just like the flexibility to say, hey, I don't want to work today, or if I want to sleep in, I can. And I think that's a good part about this business for sure.
Yeah, it's been that was a big piece of like just me wanting to start my own business, not even necessarily getting into this Webflow space, was like to kind of be the commander of my own time in the largest degree that I could possibly be. Like, I like that idea of having agency over like what it is that I'm doing, rather than somebody always telling me what to do.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'd love to chat about like what type of work you're doing currently and who you're typically serving. Do you are you doing a lot of like maintenance, retainer packages, a lot of new builds? What does your kind of day-to-day kind of look like in terms of work?
Yeah. So the weird thing about if anybody's familiar with the Flow Maestro website, like flowmaestro.dev, it's positioned me on the page as a white label developer for other agencies. And that was kind of my intention, because I knew that some work was there, and I wasn't super well connected, but I knew if I could put a good face and some good messaging and like a piece of me into it, that I might be able to like use that as a piece that I could like get into the conversation and chat with the people that I needed to make that a thing. And the strange thing about it is that I white labeled for that one agency to do that Rush project in my first week, or not my first week, but in my first month as a freelancer. And outside of that, all of the work that I've done has been for in-house teams, so in-house marketing and design teams, and I work async with them, basically to do everything that they need in their Webflow builds. And as I shared before, like I've gotten many leads, and most of them I just refer out from the Flow Maestro site. Almost all of them, I'd say all but like 10 to 15% have been agencies, or have not been agencies. They've been in-house marketing and design teams. So like it weirdly backwards positioned me as like this Webflow expert to people that I wasn't even trying to serve, right? They're like, they're able to look at that site and be like, well, if he's a white label dev for these guys, then he could be like our in-house Webflow guy. But if you can market it like this, then they presume that I could serve them, right? And I took 3 sales calls, and I closed all 3 of them So this was like October, closed one, and then November after conf, closed one, and then beginning of December, I took another call. The rest were all referred out, or they weren't of quality or any work that I wanted to do, and I closed all of them. And one of those clients I'm still working with to this day. I was doing work for them this morning, and then the other one, I started conversations with them back in December, and we didn't start work together until February. It was a pretty long game, and just through the holidays, and they had people taking vacations, sick and whatnot. And I've been working with them since February, and then I did like this whole project from December to more or less January, end of January, and that was going to continue on, but I felt myself like a little bit just overworked. Like I could do it, but like more or less just doing development for these in-house marketing and design teams and consulting them, working with them, providing feedback on their designs as I kind of get this stuff and go to implement it, and then just maintaining their sites, so shipping new landing pages, building new banners, building like cookie consents, and revamping entire CMS template pages and managing their CMS data, and just picking up little nits here and there in their Slack comms for like, oh, let's change this piece of copy to this. I'm more or less like the go-to, and those things just kind of like one company I run pretty fast and loose, just Slack. Like I talk to one guy, which is their CMO, and then I occasionally talk with some of their other team, like the guy that's running all the HubSpot things and running all the analytics, and interface with them when I need to. And then the other team, I work almost with everybody on their entire team. I kind of have like one point of contact, and then everything flows through an Asana. And I keep it super simple. It's just a task list, and it's like Webflow, and they're all assigned to me, and everything that's at the top of the list is where I start. And I just jam on these tasks, and I bill them super simple. I bill them hourly, so whatever I can do in my time is what I get done, and they value that, and I value that they're willing to pay me to do those things for them, and it's been a very good relationship. I think, I shared in the middle of that, like so January, February, March, it was March or April, I think it was March. I made my entire salary from my previous job in like the first 3 or 4 months of the year. But I was also like exhausted. So that was like that third client, and I happened to more or less like offboard that to somebody that I trusted to take care of the work that I'd worked with in the past. And like also knowing that I was going to be having a child soon, and that I wanted to have the headspace, and that I was going to try and shift my schedule a little bit to be working less and not be so taxed. And I don't know, it all just kind of worked out. It's just, I think the weird thing is that I didn't expect this to necessarily be doing the work, or like to be doing this kind of work for the companies that I am. And I guess a little bit more insight is like the companies that I'm primarily working with are, VC funded SaaS companies that just like need somebody to get in and own it and get stuff done, and that they can ask questions to at all times about all kinds of things, and they know one, that I can accomplish most things, two, that like I have some integrity, and I'm going to communicate with them like upfront about things that I can't do or I'm not comfortable with, or that I'm going to oppose things that I don't think that should be done, like just having those open, clear lines of communication. But I'm also, the thing about the community space is like you're connected with people who can solve these problems. That carries value too. And like I'm super grateful to be doing the work. I love to do the work, and I'm still challenged by it, and the clients appreciate that, and I get to show up most days and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
And I kind of like I like that challenge, and they like to serve those things up to me, and then we get them done.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, I was gonna say it sounds like a good setup, and sounds like very similar to what we do at Flow Sparrow. Like, we are working with teams pretty regularly, and we just do all the things that you mentioned, add new landing pages, update sections, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I feel like a lot of companies need that. But I think the interesting part that you mentioned that I'd like to dig into is that you bill hourly versus what's a huge craze right now is the subscription model, retainer, or whatever you want to call it. There's a bunch of different words for it now. But you know what I mean? Like that fixed monthly cost. I'm curious, like, how you thought about doing that, and like how do you think about hourly versus like a retainer, and maybe the reason why you go with hourly.
So I guess some of it, like, keep in mind that I worked in business for a long time, and I was, in charge of finances and bonuses and payroll and safety incentives and things like that. So I was always familiar with like the numbers of running a business and how those things kind of operated, and like if you were going to pay somebody the amount of value that you should get out of the work. So I guess I'll start with that, just putting that note out there. And then like when I started Flow Maestro was like very shortly, or when I got the idea, it was like very shortly after Brett started the whole Design Joy thing. I saw that and I was thinking, great, this is awesome, cool, it seems to be working for him. I caught the buzz, and I started putting this template together, and I was like, I could do this. And initially my whole pitch was like, it wasn't to agencies. And as I got into building this thing, basically as a draft in Figma, the entire idea just slowly morphed more to serve like what I thought I could actually do with integrity. Because I couldn't necessarily get behind a subscription model. And I'm a little loose on like why that is. Like I've never sat down and wrote it out. I've articulated it a few times in some other conversations, but like I guess the easiest way to frame it for me is like, we pay lawyers and therapists by the hour because they work until the job is done. The work that I end up doing, the maintenance work, is largely like up and down on demand. So charging a flat rate for that just didn't sit right with me. Like, because being a business owner, the name of the game at the end of the day is to put more money on the bottom line, like somehow, right? For most businesses, like, yeah, you might not be money hungry and like that's revenue at all costs, but if you work less and earn more, like that's better for you. But on a subscription basis, I feel like that's advantageous, not advantageous, but maybe disingenuous toward the client, potentially, for the times where they're not utilizing you to the utmost, right? So then that puts you as a service provider in a place where like your end game is ideally to work less and earn more money, which is a direct disadvantage to your client. You're just charging them and not doing anything. Now, like there's the whole, having somebody's time reserved and all of that. But I think, at least the way that I feel as I do this, that in an hourly pricing structure where like I'm just trading time for work, if that hourly figure is high enough and there's a certain threshold of work that they're guaranteed to give me, then it's a better engagement. So these clients, the few clients that I've worked with, and the two that I'm ongoing with, like they're retainer-ish type agreements. Like I had conversations with them. I understood roughly the scope of work and that they were going to have ongoing maintenance requirements thereafter, and that they needed somebody to be like their person to go to, and somebody who could just do it all and do it without any questions and just show up and get it done. So the conversations more or less went, here's my hourly rate, but if you guys can meet me with this minimum, and I can just show up and I can put in this time every single week for you or every single month, then I'm willing to drop this rate to this. So like that gives me a little bit of security and predictability in my schedule, but it also gives them an avenue to be like, okay, Tony has 10 hours this week and next week, or 40 hours for the month. He needs to have stuff to do. So the weird thing about marketing and branding and like a lot of SEO work is like it's very hard to calculate the direct results from some of these efforts. But they do know, these companies, that they need it done and they need to have somebody to do it and they need somebody to own it. So like them constantly filling my funnel with work keeps me satisfied, keeps their gears turning, and ideally is making them money, right? And I feel like that's been by and large a really good way to engage with these clients, because like there's always going to be, I don't know, like they always get some output out of what they're paying me. And I also don't have any guilt about like, oh, you want me to populate all of these CMS items. Like, you know the terms of our engagement. If you want me to sit here for an hour and do this rather than something more technical and putting, one of like your salary employees on this thing, like that's kind of up to you. So they like largely get to manage the different tasks, and I go on and I do the work and do it happily and make sure that I stay in touch with everybody that I should, and try and hit these different deadlines, kind of in that same agreement that I've set up. Like I try and preface that a little bit with like, okay, right now, just for example, like I guess just to give you a little bit more insight, I work 10 hours a week for 2 companies. So 20 hours a week, 80 hours a month. And like they do know that I have more flexibility. So if there's more work that needs done, they always have that option of being like, hey, can you help us get this across the finish line before this date? So in that same vein of charging enough with an hourly rate, like they're kind of reserving a little bit of my time to like make sure that I'm retainered, but not without, not with giving up all of that potential money. But I'm taking home enough hourly that it does not bother me at all. I guess like in the same way that a lawyer or maybe a therapist or somebody in those fields might. And and then they can just like, they can flex their needs as they need to. The other cool thing is like, if I need some time off, I can give them a heads up and I can say, hey, I'm going to take this week off. Can I fill in, these 3.25 or 3.5 hours or 3.25 hours in these other weeks to fill in that gap where I'm not going to be here? Like, I'll still put in my time, I'll still take home the same amount of money, but I'll take 1 full week off here and I'll just fill in the rest of, the month with the rest of the work that would have taken place. And that's been super nice, like, especially with like the birth of our daughter last month. I took a bunch of loose ends to wrap up, and then I took an entire, like a week and a half off.
Nice.
Like during the labor and like after she was born, and then I kind of coasted back into working with these guys. Again, it's a little bit easier for me because I do it all from home, but like I was able to have that flexibility just because I let them know ahead of time. And then like say I put in 20 hours for one company 1 month instead of the 40. Okay, that budget is still there for that company. It's just a matter of me going, hey, so because I didn't meet those hours, like, do you guys still need all that work done? Can I leverage that same time and that same budget this upcoming month? Can I instead put in 60 hours of time for you this month and I can make all that back up, which is like what's happened. So I kind of have a little flexibility in the income, and there's not it's very predictable, which is one of the advantages that you get from, like a subscription type model.
Yeah. No, dude, I really appreciate that. It's like a client focused approach. You just want to make them happy, make sure they're making money and not wasting money. And to be fair, like, yeah, I'm like on the other side of the spectrum. Like, we do subscription. We've definitely
Yeah.
had clients with months that they just don't say anything for the entire month, and then I obviously, I mean, I think this might not be obvious for everybody, but um, in that situation. But how I think about it is, I get nervous. I
Mm.
feel kind of like, oh, I want to be able to provide value. So what we typically do in that situation is like, hey, like, think through some stuff that we could do. Like, hey, CMS needs a cleanup. Let's do that. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's audit their GTM or something. We try to just pitch that to them, or we just, put them on a pause or something. But thankfully, in general, like all of our clients actually need us just a lot
Yeah.
every month, and it's pretty hectic. But another thing you mentioned that I really liked is the hourly thing, where you could actually feel the need to take the time off, because that's one downside of how we
Yeah.
approach it. Really, is like, I don't think I've ever felt comfortable taking time off since we started.
Yeah.
And thankfully, like, the team has been fantastic at Flow and been able to start take that over fully without me there, and that feels great.
I'll bet.
But it took a while to get there, and yeah, it's I burnt out a lot of times because of that. So it's tough, but
Yeah. Well, I've mentioned this before, and you'll see some people talk about it. Like Grace Walker's a big proponent of this, but like value is very subjective to like whoever you're
yes,
providing it to. So the clients that I work with, like the communications that I have with them, like they know, right, that I'm having a kid. They know roughly like what my other engagements are, and like how, how I kind of need my schedule to work. But how like I will always get things done for them, and they can, like, when I was working for those 3 clients, I was getting the work done, but I was gassing myself out. I was not enthusiastic about it. I was nearing a point of burnout. Yeah, I was making good money, but I couldn't sustain it. I think a piece of value that you communicate, maybe not even consciously, when you're open with your clients about like how things are kind of going, like they knew that I just straight up told them, I said, guys, like I'm doing my best here. I'm trying to get through the queue. I'm putting in my time. But I don't feel like I'm doing you the best service with our agreement here. But I think like in charging an appropriate amount of money for my time, like they know that I was the kind of person who would take responsibility for that and make it right. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you're overworking yourself, so find a way to not overwork yourself. And there's like this level of mutual respect and sort of humanity that kind of crosses the value threshold there. And yeah, I think like that's worked out really well for me, especially like in my client communication front, just like being me. Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to dig into that a little bit. Just like, I feel like from all the stuff you're saying, I feel like you're probably a pleasure to work with, um, and do you think that you got some of those traits from your retail work,
100%.
and like the jobs that you had before?
Yeah.
Because for me, to be honest, like it took me a while to get really good at serving customers. Because before that, I just worked at like companies, like a warehouse job, or like I worked in the trades for a little bit, where you would just like, you're working for a company, you're not dealing with clients directly. And I think it took a little while for me to get used to that. So yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on that, and do you think that kind of derived from those retail jobs or sales jobs?
Yeah. I think life's experiences can teach you a lot, just kind of all across the board, and we often don't give them enough credit. Or we think that like that's the thread that everyone else pulls, so like that's not the one that I want to pull or is applicable to me, because that's not the experience that I had. But I think if you go looking for confirmation that life is giving you signals to like act a certain way or show up a certain way or move in a certain direction, like those things can kind of like propel you forward. So in my retail career, one thing that I drew on was like this is weird, but this isn't the first time I've ever heard this said. I played World of Warcraft for like years. I would sign on and I would do these raids, and I would sit and I'd dedicate anywhere from 2 to 4 hours 5 nights a week to raid with my team so that we could show up and like be on the leaderboards and be the ones to get these like first kills and things like that. And in that time, like, I was in a guild and I moved up the ranks in the guild, so I got to see a little bit of the politics there and like relate with those different people. And then I got to be a raid leader and like an officer in the guild. And I mean, I'm this teenage kid telling adults like largely how things are going to be and like when to move and to get out of the fire and like do these different things. And I drew like weirdly in my supervisory experience, like on those experiences. And like, you know, that kind of comes with just in like certain moments you're like, oh, that's something that I picked up from way back then, and like that's just like a character trait or something that I noticed that worked really well to work with other people to get everybody on the team to do what we needed to do to carry, you know, the torch. And then the same thing in retail, like looking back now on my retail career, all of those things that I did in that time definitely had an impact, or definitely have an impact on like how I communicate. You know, because like when you're climbing the ladder, you're looking up generally at somebody, and you're saying like, how did they get there? Why, you know, a lot of people have disrespect for like somebody who is above them. You know, they don't like their management or like all the stuff that comes rolling down from corporate and those different things, and they like to complain about it. But as I said before, like if I put myself in their shoes, you know, like they got there for a reason. They had to show up and they had to be like this every single day. They had to have these values. But kind of in that, I also noticed this other, like these kind of different ways of doing things. Like I could do things the way that everybody says that I should do them, like follow all this dogma and like, you know, just kind of be a slave to my job and treat people with disrespect. Or like I can just show up as me and do the best I can to like do everything for the team, and listen and be a real human and have feelings, like do stuff that just makes me feel good rather than makes me feel bad. And yeah, I think I've led in those roles with a different style than most people would. I still go into those stores and like I live in a community of like 35,000 people here on the coast, so a pretty small town. I go all over town and people go, we still miss you at Safeway. Like, you know, like it was this weird thing, like I'd become somewhat of a staple in some people's lives because I worked at a grocery store. But I know a ton of people who worked in those grocery stores that people wouldn't say those kind of things to for one reason or another. And like, that's not to toot my own horn, but I think that's one thing about just living in congruence with like who you are and being okay with like your humanity and, you know, like sharing that kind of stuff. And yeah, I largely carry that into my client conversations to this day. Like I check in with people like, oh, you're moving, like how's that been? How are you feeling? Are you ready to work today? Or like, what's this like? You know, how's your summer going? Those kind of different things. And they reciprocate, I think. I think that's another piece of sort of value that is provided, is like you're not just talking with somebody that you're contracting with. It's not just a work engagement. Like these are the things that take up our time and like make up our lives. So like I don't know why you'd want to do them in a way that you wouldn't enjoy. And I think when you show up with that energy, people like it.
Yeah, I really respect all that, man. I think a big shift for me happened when I started to really care about the customers and the outcomes. And I think early on I kind of thought of it. It felt disconnected because it was like somebody through a computer screen, through Zoom or whatever. It almost felt like a little video game or something. It didn't feel like it was real, and I was just getting some money, and it just felt like a game almost. But when I started caring about the customers and like, you know, checking in with them, talking with them, trying to maybe build a personal relationship in some capacity a little bit, even if it's
Yeah.
light and not too serious. I really feel like that's when things started to change and work was enjoyable. Clients were happier in general. And I think it's just a great way to run a business. And I think it's really easy to forget that, especially like I mentioned, the remote work lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like it's really easy to forget that. So I just urge everybody listening to make sure you care about their customers. Try to
Right.
solve their problems before they have them, and just appreciate the opportunity because that's another thing is like I sometimes might not appreciate the clients that I have as much as I should, and that's really easy to that's a big problem. You need to appreciate the value that they're giving you alongside it needs to go both ways as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you can like, I don't know. It's funny, like the different frames that you come into is like you go through these different sort of phases and like your own personal journey, or your own freelance journey or agency journey or what have you. Like you can have two agencies or two freelancers in the same shoes, and one of them can just be absolutely high on life, and the other one can just be hating it. And it's largely about like our previous experiences or like how we frame these things. So that's one thing that I'm always trying to like bring to the table is like, it isn't me. like is there something else that's bothering me that's like why I don't want to do this thing for the client, or like do I just need to be like upfront about like how I feel about the thing that I'm being asked to do, or just having those like very real communications with your clients and with yourself, and just like constantly kind of shifting that frame around as you need it, and then taking care of the things that might be making you suffer in some way. Like, I'm nearing burnout. I wonder why. I knew like cool, I'm making all this money, but like I don't want to do my work anymore. I don't want to work with any of my clients. I need more headspace, right? Like, then address it, and then tell my clients that I've overbooked. Like, they're gonna respect that, and they're gonna be like, oh, okay, but he's working on the steps to fix that thing, right? Anyway, tangent.
No, that's a good point. I think that's a great place to maybe wrap it up. I would love to hear your plans for the future, Tony, before we put a bow on it. What some goals you have for the next couple months, and plans for your business and maybe your family and life and stuff.
It's a good question.
A big question. It's a big one.
Well, and I said that I sat down and I wrote with a notebook before.
Yeah.
It's just a moleskin notebook. And that's something that's been on my radar to do here again, because I've largely kind of landed in the place that I wanted to land in, and I want to spend some time figuring out what the next 6 months to a year to 5 years might look like. 5 years is a pretty big stretch, and I like to keep things pretty flexible. But I like to spend some quality time thinking about that. But I have a few different ideas. Like, I really enjoy what I do. I'm really grateful for the community in the space. I think that there's an opportunity for more education kind of in this like technical Webflow world, no-code world. I think there's kind of a voice for every audience. That's another neat thing about creating content is like you don't have to be the best, but you might just be the one that somebody relates to, that they like to listen to for one reason or another. So I've shared with you at some point like somewhat of a community education project that I was working on. It's kind of been backburnered. I do have a roadmap to kind of get that rolled out, but that's taken a pause with the birth of my daughter, which is totally acceptable and par for the course as far as I'm concerned. And I want to take, I'm entertaining a couple things like I want to take the experience that I've been fortunate enough to get over the last almost year with my current clients and figure out some way to articulate that into something that can maybe save people time and money in the future. Whether that's through writing or video content or just talking to other folks in the space. I'm not totally certain on, but there's that. And then I'm kind of mulling over. I am missing a little bit working with a team. I like a little bit what I do, but I'm kind of integrated with the teams that I work with, but not on a super tight-knit basis. And I did like working with other people and kind of being a leader and working toward a common goal and kind of helping people realize their potential and giving them the resources to do so. So maybe something in that vein with a select few folks to try and one, serve that need for me, two, to help them along, and then three, obviously to surf some clients and get some work done and take care of those business goals. So kind of entertaining some stuff there. Yeah, education, potential growth for the business, and maybe this brand, maybe another brand. I've not quite sussed it all out, and then just staying active in the space and continuing to connect with people and do good work and keep learning and growing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can share that having a team or people that you can kind of hop on and connect with every day is helpful, especially in this remote work life. There's obviously pros and cons to that. I mean, you're kind of responsible for their well-being and stuff in some cases, which is stressful. But overall, I really enjoy having a team and working with them. So just a note if that's a world you want to explore.
Yeah.
But when I was talking, I asked you about your future, but it sounds like you got a really good setup right now. And maybe it might be just an awesome opportunity to bask in it. And I think this is more a note for myself, but I think it's good to appreciate what current situation you're in. And I forget this all the time, where I'm always thinking about the next thing, constantly. I'm just trying to feel like I'm chasing cars, new ideas. Just see my notes; they're crazy. I just a bunch of they're a bunch of silly ideas of things that I want to do. But I think we both can, we've been doing it for a while. I think we can appreciate the situations that we have and just enjoy it without adding more new stresses into it, new projects, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's that's what I'm kind of doing with the birth of my daughter and taking that time and having that flexibility, is just really basking in it and just exercising some of that freedom and enjoying the space that I've kind of built around my life to live in and work within. And then figuring out maybe what the next piece of that looks like, where I'm going to be comfortable and
Amazing. Well, dude, thank you so much for hopping on, man. This is so much fun. I always love chatting with you. I feel like your energy is so good, and I can tell you're a deep thinker, and you think about this stuff a lot. And I feel like that shined through in the conversation, and it was great hearing the story, how you're feeling about parenting and stuff. Congrats for a third time, by the way.
Thank you.
So good. I'm very excited for you, and then hopefully we can catch up in person again sometime soon.
Absolutely, man. It'd be awesome.
But thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers, buddy.
See ya.